What's going on, guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of fights. This is the big pay-per-view. One of my most anticipated fights of the entire year so far is seeing Jiri Prochazka challenge Glover Texeira for the 205-pound strap. Also, we got Valentina Shevchenko defending her title against Taila Santos. And the third fight down on the list is, a potential contenders bout between Zhang Weili and the returning Jedrzejczyk. So that's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of good betting opportunities on this card, a lot of live underdogs I see on this card, some close fights. Obviously, this fight card being in Singapore this weekend, they're going to be showcasing a lot of the Asian market talent. So that's going to be fun to see. It looks like a pretty well-rounded card, even though lacking some name value on the prelims as usual. But either way, I think besides heavyweight, I think every single division in the UFC is represented on this card, just about. All the way from women's strawweight all the way up to the men's light heavyweight. So I think everywhere in between is covered except for heavyweight. So that's a kind of an interesting dynamic for this card too. But a lot of close fights, some returning fighters, some pretty interesting matchups, steps up in competition. Everything to love on this card. I'm going to be expecting this one to deliver. Coming off of a very hot betting week last week where we cashed, well over 16 units on the UFC Fight Night 56. So we're going to try to roll into this week, continuing the same success. Without further ado, let's get into the first fight. Okay, the early prelims begins with a women's featherweight bout between Ramona Pascual making her second walk to the cage against Jocelyn Edwards. I think this will be Edwards' fourth fight in the UFC. She's currently on a 2-fight losing streak. Ramona Pascual, making her sophomore effort here in the UFC after losing her debut against Josiah Nunes. Josiah Nunes is a beast at 135, moved up to 145 to face Ramona at her natural weight class. Probably the heaviest puncher that Ramona's ever faced before. Josiah Nunes, even though the smaller woman, was able to piece her up and almost finish her in round 2. Dropped her with a couple heavy strikes against the cage, some follow-up ground and pound shots. And if it wasn't for Ramona's size, a little bit of durability she showed and some tenacity there, she was able to kind of, use her grappling to stay safe a little bit and ride out a decision loss versus getting finished. So, more power to Ramona Pascual for showing a little bit of toughness, a little bit of heart in that fight. But overall, her striking looks piss poor. Her striking defense is not good. She's very slow and plodding on the feet. She's going to have to get this fight to the ground against Jocelyn Edwards. She's going to have to. And not only get it to the ground once, but maintain top control for almost all 3 rounds, and maybe find a submission in there. Her cardio looks questionable even when she's grappling and, kind of in her realm of the fight, which is the grappling. Anytime she strikes for an extended period of time, she looks very gassed out early on. Even when she's grappling and trying to hold strong women down, her cardio can wear out. So I'm kind of skeptical for Ramona Pascual here. Jocelyn Edwards has not looked great in the UFC, but what we have seen of her stand-up is it's very powerful, pretty technical. She's got good attributes, very good kicks, some good combos that catch her opponents at the end of her strikes. And if she can maintain range in this fight, for any extended period of time, she will definitely win. I think the disparity on the feet is so much night and day that I kind of do agree with this money line. Minus 165 for Edwards, plus 145 for Pascual. That seems about right for me. I don't think there's a whole lot of extra value betting-wise on Jocelyn Edwards. The only reason being is because this will be up a weight class for Jocelyn Edwards, so that kind of sketches me out a little bit. Otherwise, I'd be much more confident. This fight needs to stay on the feet for Jocelyn Edwards. I think if it does that for any extended period of time, she will win the fight quite easily. And one thing that Ramona Pascual did, even against Josiah Nunes, who she knew was a very powerful puncher, who she knew was looking to get her out of there early, she stood and struck with her for 3.5 minutes of round 1 before attempting a takedown. It's like she had to get in trouble on the feet before she even went for the takedown. So, it seemed like she was a little bit more confident in her size advantage over Josiah Nunes, and maybe she'll have that same sort of confidence against, Jocelyn Edwards, since this is Ramona Pascual's natural weight class. But if she's smart at all, she will go for the takedown, go for the hips immediately, and try to get this fight to the ground. But if based on what we just saw against Josiah Nunes, who is a powerful striker, she was content to stand and bang with her for 3.5 minutes. So I like Jocelyn Edwards' ability to scramble to her feet. Obviously, if you watch the last fight against Jessica Rose Clark, she didn't have much success, but when she did, the only reason she couldn't mount more offense standing is the round would be just about over. Jessica Rose Clark would hang on to that top control position, whether it be in full mount or full guard for most of the round, and could not posture up and really dish out any damage, because she was going to be, bucked up by the hips of Jocelyn Edwards, and Jocelyn Edwards was very explosive at getting back to her feet and didn't really gas out after 3 rounds of trying to do that. So I think that Jessica Rose Clark obviously is way more advanced at grappling and holding top control than Ramona Pascual. I don't see Ramona Pascual holding down Jocelyn Edwards, even if she does get her to the ground. So cardio, speed, youth, the striking advantage, the UFC experience, all these things point in the direction of Jocelyn Edwards. It sounds like I'm super confident in her. I'm really not. I think that the money line at minus 165 is correct. This is not really, I don't see really any ways to bet this fight. Maybe Jocelyn Edwards by decision if you want extra value on her, but even still, she could probably finish this fight striking-wise, too. Ramona could gas out, or her striking defense will be so bad that she gets finished by a strike. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of ways to bet this fight, in all honesty, but I am going to pick Jocelyn Edwards to win the fight. Another women's bout up next, this time at women's strawweight, 115, between Na Liang returning to face Silvana Gomez Juarez. And Na Liang, of course, made her debut in a losing effort, but an exciting losing effort last year against Ariane Carnelossi, where she pretty much emptied her gas tank. I mean, these two met each other in the center of the octagon. Na Liang actually dropped her in the opening seconds with a right cross that, Ariane Carnelossi did not see coming. And, after that, it was just all-action war for a whole round. Na Liang was able to take down Carnelossi several times. Ariane Carnelossi is just a pure ball of muscle, obviously, and, that really gassed out Na Liang, I think, doing all of the wrestling sequences, trying to hold her down, trying to keep her down, take her back down, drag her down against the cage, strike with her. I think she just really just emptied out her gas tank. Huge adrenaline dump probably in her debut. The fans were back for the first time. There's a lot of excuses to be made about Na Liang, but, sometimes you see this in the debut efforts of some of these fighters, too. Na Liang was probably, I think she was 24 at the time, and probably used to running through a lot of opponents in round one that would have folded to that right cross that she dropped Ariane Carnelossi with. So it was a big step up in competition, a huge stage. There's a lot of things that you can forgive. I'm kind of glad that she took a little over a year off at 25 years old now, to kind of make some advancements in her game. Now, Silvana Gomez Juarez is making her third effort here in the UFC. I think she debuted in the fall of last year, like October or something, against Lupi Godinez. Lost in round one by submission, taken down like 4 or 5 times in that fight. Had no defense against the takedowns or the submission that happened in round one. Armbar, came back like 4 months later in January of this year, lost by armbar again against Vanessa Demopoulos. But in that fight, we saw a little bit of the powerful striking of Silvana Gomez Juarez. She was able to, I think with a big overhand right, drop Vanessa Demopoulos to the ground. Unfortunately, rookie mistake, low IQ mistake, bad submission defense mistake, followed her to the ground, got armbarred in round one once again. So the armbar is actually the signature maneuver of Na Liang, who has several of those on her record. At just 25 years old, she's 19-5, is Na Liang. Again, probably not all against the best competition over there in the Asian regional scene, but I like what I do see from her, especially what we saw from her in her last fight. The takedown offense is very good, and more importantly, maintaining that top pressure is very, very good. If you watch some of her regional scene tape from Na Liang, she gets a lot of easy takedowns on women who don't have good takedown defense, but is able to hold them in position. And she was able to hold down Ariane Carnelossi, who, like I said, is a ball of roided out muscle. And she was able to hold her in position for quite a long time, doing some great things, establishing a great base, and keeping chest-to-chest contact and keeping her opponent's shoulders on the mat. She's very good at doing that, making sure they cannot move, and she can then set up whatever trick she has coming next in her jiu-jitsu offense. So I love that. And I think against Silvana Gomez Juarez, a woman who's not going to have that type of ability to get back to her feet, she's got very, very bad submission defense, very bad takedown defense. And that's really what I see winning this fight. Na Liang has serviceable striking as well, just mostly based off of the aggressive nature of it. But she's got serviceable enough offense to march forward and then eventually distract with some strikes up top and then work her takedown offense. I think that's how this fight plays out. Silvana Gomez Juarez, let's be honest, anytime she has a step up in competition, she is 10-4. All four of those women that she has lost to have been that step up in competition, that kind of UFC caliber ish opponent. She does have a win, I believe it was, over who was it, Vanessa Mello or somebody like that, who really just didn't have any success in the UFC. She wasn't very much UFC caliber herself. That's the only other UFC veteran name that she has a win over. Everybody else has really dusted her when she takes that next step up in competition. And compared to Na Liang at 25 years old, who still has the ability to make improvements and only needs to make improvements in her pacing and her cardio, Silvana Gomez Juarez needs to make a lot of technical changes to her game, and she's 37, already 0-2 in the UFC. I don't think she's going to win this fight. Na Liang is the slight underdog, only to sweeten this pick, plus 130 compared to the favorite price of minus 150 for Silvana Gomez Juarez. I'm taking the underdog in Na Liang. I think she's going to win this fight by submission in rounds 1 or rounds 2. If not, I do think that she can win a decision here. I know that that's probably a hot take since she looked so bad when she gassed out against Ariane Carnelossi, but I'm willing to forgive the UFC jitters, the adrenaline dump, and more importantly, the fact that she really went really fast-paced against a ball of muscle, trying to hold her down and wrestle her, I think is really what did all of the gassing out there. I don't think she's going to have that type of resistance against Gomez Juarez, therefore I don't think she'll gas out as easily. Obviously, this is a low-confidence pick because it's low-confidence women's MMA, but just based off of the skill sets and, just the intangibles like the age and all of that, the measurables, I think that Na Liang is a very good underdog pick this week. In a fight that I see probably 60% Na Liang, 40% Silvana Gomez Juarez, the fact that I get plus money on Na Liang, whose win condition really goes right into the weakness of Silvana Gomez, I will take this underdog shot all day. Give me Na Liang by submission. Up next at men's bantamweight, closing out the early prelims of the night, is Kang taking on Batgerel. An interesting fight because, for several reasons. First off, Kang has been in the UFC for quite a while. I remember seeing this guy's debut, I believe it was, against my boy Bruce Leroy back in 2013. He's one of these Korean guys who would take that military leave of absence for a few years, similar to what Chang Sung-jung had to do as well. So he came back, in the middle of 2015 or so. After that leave of absence, came back. But the guy has a pretty interesting style. One of these styles that leads to a lot of close decisions. He's had 3 submissions in the UFC. 5 split decisions that he often loses. I believe total in his career, he's 4-7 in decisions. So one of these styles where he's always going to threaten the takedown, go for the control time either against the fence or on the ground. Look for the submission. If it's not there, he'll just ride out the control time. If he faces a decent striker, though, he'll get outstruck on the numbers, and then it becomes this toss-up game of do the judges favor the control time, or do they favor the damage and significant strike totals? So that's kind of what leads to a lot of the split decisions, and I don't think that's going to be any different here. It's an interesting fight because Batgerel has lost to Healy Alatang in his debut, largely because of getting controlled against in the 3rd round. Also outstruck a bit on the numbers as well. So he lost that opening fight, went on a 3 knockout in the 1st round streak, and then just lost in round 2 by KO to Chris Gutierrez. So a guy who's never been submitted is Batgerel. A guy who's only been taken down in the UFC by Healy Alatang. The other guys, he really never gave a chance to take him down. He just knocked him out. But Kang has never been knocked out. He was knocked out once, all the way back in 2008, by ground kicks to the face. So that's not going to happen to him here, obviously. But his durability has proven up since then. So Not always facing a top-tier striker like Batgerel, but, you know, that just an interesting dynamic there between the strength for one guy, the other, his opponent really has never suffered defeat that way. So I found that to be a little bit interesting. Also leads me to be very confused in this fight. So I had to go back, really look at the tape, look at how Kang acts early in round one is very crucial in this tape study, because that's when Batgerel is looking to do his best work. He'll headhunt early, pressure forward, and really just look to take his opponent's head off. He does have very good switch stance ability as well. He's got a very good like darting in right cross he'll throw. He'll do like a jab to left hook combination as well. Really do a lot of things where he hides the strikes that are going to be the damaging knockout blow. And I like his style a lot, you know. As far as decisions for Batgerel in his pro career, he's 2-2 in decision, so a little bit more of a better record there decision-wise, but not really going to decision in the UFC, except for the Healy Alateng fight, which he lost. So, you know, looking at Kang, whenever he fights a guy who's going to be susceptible to that takedown, he goes for it very early. Wastes no time. Within a minute or two of round one, he starts working those takedowns. I think he'll do that here against Batgerel. The only time that Kang has struggled was like kind of in his last fight, where he fought Rani Yahya, who actually wanted the takedown more than Kang did. So he got controlled himself, outstruck himself, and lost the decision there. There's going to be a little bit of a measurable advantage for Kang, 5'9", so 2 inches of height, 2 inches of reach, and he's, as long as he's been in the organization and fighting, he's only 34 years old, so only 2 years the elder. I found that to be interesting too. So kind of pushing that boundary of where a bantamweight's going to be in his prime. You know, stylistically here, it's a very, very close fight. You know, Batgerel obviously could knock out Kang, who keeps his head rather high. His defense is not the best striking-wise, but I think he is fast enough, and I think he will level change and avoid some damage early. Batgerel, obviously, he can fade as the fight goes on. He can become more predictable as the fight goes on. That's how he lost to Chris Gutierrez. It was not really a flash in the pan, you know, spinning back fist knockout. Obviously, those things do happen, but it was because Batgerel had slowed down so much after round one that his movements were more predictable. You could see Chris Gutierrez had been going for spinning attacks, sort of calibrating them, gauging them as the fight went on, and eventually he was able to switch stances and see that Batgerel was not darting forward, headhunting as much. His movements were much more predictable, and he got knocked out for it. So I don't think it was that lucky. I think it was just the fact that he had slowed down really made him susceptible to that. Except for in this fight, I think that slowing down will make him susceptible to getting taken down and controlled, and not really have the tools or energy to get back to his feet. It's a close fight, and the money line reflects it. Right now, currently, these guys are plus 125 for Kang, minus 145 for Batgerel. I really do see this fight playing out mostly on the ground, mostly in the favor of Kang. I think Batgerel he's got pretty good significant strikes landed per minute, but you know, those stats are really flawed because it's a lot of round one finishes where he was able to land pretty much everything at 100% accuracy when he needed to knock the guy out, and it's an easy day in the office for him. I think Kang is a pretty good underdog here. I think he can make this happen. He might get knocked out in round one. That's a big possibility. We've never seen him fall that way before. I'm more apt to take the round, or take the side of the guy who can win rounds minute by minute, using that control time, and maybe even threaten a submission victory. So give me Kang, another underdog tonight. Up next at welterweight is a bout between Jake Matthews and Andre Fialho. Andre Fialho making quick turnarounds these days. You love to see it. The minus 150 favorite is Fialho versus the plus 120 underdog price tag on Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews has been in the UFC for forever, starting at lightweight and now growing into his mature 27-year-old physique at welterweight. I mean, he started all the way back at the age of like 19 or 20 back in 2014, so it's been a long time for him. Andre Fialho, I think, making his fourth walk to the cage now. He started off with his loss on short notice against Michel Pereira. And then after that, he came back against, Miguel Baeza, first round knockout, and now Cameron Van Camp, short notice, first round brutal knockout. So yeah, this will be his fourth walk to the cage, and that kind of explains the price tag on these two, right? Jake Matthews, not very active, but he last fought last year against Sean Brady, got tapped out in the third round. no shame there. Sean Brady is very, very good. So he's coming off of a loss. Haven't seen a whole lot of him. Andre Fialho, the hot new prospect in the UFC, made a good showing of himself in a loss against Michel Pereira. Who everybody knows, he came against Miguel Baeza, stole his shine, and knocked him out in round 1, and then knocked out Cameron Van Camp brutally in round 1. So, recency bias baked into these money lines here. Minus 150 for Fialho, even though the wealth of experience goes to Jake Matthews. He's the plus 120 underdog. Okay, so 17-5 record for Matthews, 16-4-1 for Andre Fialho. So even their records match up very, very equally. I like the activity from Andre Fialho, but honestly, the last win that he got against Cameron Van Camp, gotta say, a little bit expected. We knew the limitations of Van Camp based on his short notice. The short notice nature of it. We saw his regional scene tape. It wasn't all that impressive, all things considered, compared to fighting Miguel Baeza, fighting some of the guys in Bellator he'd fought, and then coming to the UFC and fighting Michel Pereira. We pretty much assumed, based on all the comparisons, that he would go in there and probably knock out Van Camp, which he did. So at least he proved it to us. It just seems like Andre Fialho fights on a timer, though. In his last 10 fights, any fight that goes over 1.5 rounds, he loses those fights, whether it be decision or him gassing out and getting finished himself. So he does have great counters. He does have really great traditional boxing skill, does Fialho. Amazing power, definitely power in both hands. Like I mentioned, great counters. That fundamental boxing skill, he's translated it very well to MMA, just extending things a little bit, making those hooks just a little bit wider to get over the gloves and get right into the jaw of his opponents as they're coming in. He's got pretty decent movement as well. I think that Jake Matthews, though, will match his speed, match his athleticism. Jake Matthews, I think, is just a little bit faster and much, much more well-rounded. Like I mentioned, he's a BJJ black belt, been in the UFC since 2014. He's seen a lot of people, and the only people that have really given him trouble are fellow grapplers like himself, fellow submission artists like himself. If he gets tapped out, or a guy can match, the amount of takedowns that he threatens, maybe hit the reversals a little bit smoother than him, they end up beating him. Those are the only guys that he really loses against. Andre Fialho is not any of that. He's a guy who you're going to have to be careful with in the early going of the fight. If you're going to go for those takedowns, like I hope Jake Matthews does, and I assume he will, he's going to have to be pretty careful in the early going of the fight. Like I mentioned, it seems like Andre Fialho does fight on a timer, so if he can kind of pace himself, Jake Matthews be serviceable enough in the striking early, defensively sound, keep his movement, stay on his P's and Q's with the movement, and not get too careless rushing in for the takedown or make it too obvious. I think he should be good. Get out of round 1. Maybe threaten the takedown towards the end of the round. I think he can win this fight based on control time and eventually tire out Andre Fialho and probably be live for a submission later in the fight. And that's kind of the direction I'm headed with this one. This is a close fight. Jake Matthews has never really been knocked out. I think he was TKO'd by Kevin Lee like around 6 or 7 years ago. So it's been a long time. But since then, he's faced a variety of different opponents in the UFC. And he wears his damage pretty well. Has pretty good movement, as I mentioned as well. So his chin has proven to be pretty durable. He's averaging quite a lot of activity as far as the grappling goes, almost 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. So you like to see that against Andre Fialho as well. And I just think that the grappling will tire out Andre Fialho a lot more than the striking will tire out Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews, more of a generalist, more of a well-rounded guy, but he has that smooth, tricky submission offense in his back pocket for when this fight goes into deep waters. Like I said, over that 1.5 round mark where Andre Fialho tends to fall off, I think Jake Matthews can take over and probably get a submission late is where I'm leaning. So either a round 2 or round 3 submission for the underdog, Jake Matthews. That's my pick for this fight. Another underdog pick on this card. Up next, a men's lightweight bout between Maheshate versus Steve Garcia. Maheshate we saw in the Dana White Contender Series last fall. He opened up at like a plus 200, plus 250 underdog price against Estremadura. and, faced adversity at a couple of points pretty badly in round 1 and a little bit in round 2, but he came back and made his way to a victory in a closely contested fight. Got better as the fight went, showed a lot of toughness, a lot of heart, and decent striking in a stand-up affair in that bout. Only 22 years old is the Chinese prospect, Maheshate, 6 foot tall, 71.5-inch reach. He is now making his debut against Steve Garcia, who is 30 years old, the same height, 73-inch reach for Steve Garcia, a guy who is 12-4 professionally, versus Maheshate is 6-1. So Maheshate is the plus 150 underdog. Steve Garcia minus 170 favorite currently. Steve Garcia was on the Dana White Contender Series at 1.2, I believe in 2020, if I remember correctly, and he missed weight and was not awarded a contract for his TKO in round 1. But the guy has been on some big stages before. He had a 7-fight stint in Bellator in his past, where he went 5-2, defeating some notable guys, losing to some notable guys that have been in the UFC as well. So he certainly has a ceiling to him. Does Steve Garcia? Definitely limited. He's a pretty good generalist as a mixed martial artist. Pretty serviceable striking. Questionable durability against some hard hitters, but he does a good job of mixing it up, brawling, and also getting takedowns and working some good top pressure when necessary. So I think that's really what's going to serve him well against a 22-year-old young debutant in Maheshate here. Maheshate looked very good in that Dana White Contender Series bout where he came back, but there were no threats of the takedown. And he was actually generally pretty low output until Estremadura slowed down from the blitz in round 1 when he got a little bit tired. And, I'm not going to take away the fact that Maheshate had some pretty good combos, a pretty sick flying knee at one point that landed flush on the chin of Estremadura. And only when Estremadura was hurt and cowering against the cage and kind of not answering counters or strikes was his output pretty extraordinary. Otherwise it was a one hit at a time, one combo at a time, and then pause and rest. Maybe one big explosive action like that jumping knee or a front kick up the middle, then he would rest, and it would be low output again. So he did win the fight. It was close after the adversity round 1, but, he does look to have some decent combinations in the feet, good feints, good movement, a decent amount of speed, but overall, he still looks very green to me, and I want to see that ground game tested. So I think Steve Garcia is the guy to do it. This is a close fight, limited information on Maheshate. As far as Chinese prospects go, he seems to be one of the better ones, especially for his age. Seems to have pretty good form. Like I said, pretty good movement, good feints, some good combinations he sets up with the hands and with his, kicks and knees and all that, but the output seems to be a little bit low for my liking, and the guy just needs to be tested on the ground. And I think Steve Garcia is the guy to test him on the ground. I think if he mixes up and has a good game plan together, can mix up, staying defensively sound on the feet, mixing up some good combinations, and then eventually, as the round wears on, if he can get that takedown and get some top control time, just to mix things up. So a mix of control time, threatening some submissions potentially. Steve Garcia does have a pretty good ability to hold down opponents, and mount some offense on the ground as well, especially pushing them up against the cage, the way he did Charlie Ontiveros in his last fight. I know Charlie Ontiveros is kind of a poor example because that guy breaks so easily as the fight goes, but, nonetheless, he was a big guy, a guy who's fought up a weight class, had some height and reach on Steve Garcia. I think that'll serve him well. That was a good fight to see. Steve Garcia back in the win column, and he won the fight by mixing things up, and I think that's what he's going to do here. The wealth of experience and the resume is really what I'm going off of to make this pick. Not my strongest pick, but I will take the favorite, Steve Garcia, to win, I would say, by decision in this fight. Up next, a men's featherweight bout between Josh Culibao taking on the returning Sung Woo Choi. An interesting fight here for a few reasons. One being the money line is pretty wide for my liking. Honestly, I do like Sung Woo Choi, but minus 250 at this point, kind of steep on him, I'd say, looking past the value on Josh Culibao at plus 195, the underdog price. And I wonder, that'll probably keep moving, you know, a little bit as the week goes on. Both guys about the same age, just a handful of months separate them. 29, Seungwoo Choi, 28 for Josh Culibao. Seungwoo Choi, a pretty tall featherweight at 6 foot tall. He's got an inch of reach at 74-inch reach and 2 inches of height over the 5'10" Josh Culibao. You know, this will be kind of a break for Seungwoo Choi in a way, a good bounce back spot in my opinion, because he is a kickboxer, decorated kickboxer who loves striking at distance, very powerful, good techniques, you know, very good rangy strikes. He does well in the clinch as well, you know, on the cage, but you know, at range, this will be Seungwoo Choi all day, in my opinion. And finally, a guy who's not going to be trying to take him down the whole time. Seungwoo Choi is a guy who had to make his debut against Movsar Evloev. Just a, you know, impossible task in your debut for a kickboxer. Movsar controlled him the entire time, got a decision win over him. Very next fight for Seungwoo Choi gets choked out by Gavin Tucker. You know, strings together some impressive wins. Shows a good knockout over Julian Erosa, and then ends up, you know, knocking out Bruce Leroy. Too bad it was an illegal shot that had to follow up the striking sequence. Bruce Leroy was able to you know, compose himself. A point was taken, yada, yada, yada. He recovered. Actually ended up going back the next round and choking out Seungwoo Choi, backpacking him, getting a rear naked choke. So Seungwoo Choi has been plagued in his efforts so far by these, you know, annoying grapplers, annoying submission artists. But this won't be the case. This should be a bounce back spot where he can fight a guy at range. Josh Culibao probably will want to make this ugly. You know, if Seungwoo Choi wants to engage in some of that dirty boxing, some of that clinch work against the cage, that's probably where Josh Culibao will have the most success. A guy who does attempt a lot of takedowns, but so far hasn't gotten any in the UFC. So that's good for Seungwoo Choi, who seems to be, you know, that seems to be the chink in his armor. That seems to be where he's improving. And that's probably, you know, the thing that you would attack if you're fighting Seungwoo Choi, is to try to get him to the ground. But so far, Josh Culibao has not shown a good ability to do that. So this should be a break for Seungwoo Choi. You know, he's just got the way better experience so far in the UFC. He's faced some really tough guys. Like I said, the guy debuted against Seungwoo Choi. He's looked good against some top-tier competition so far. Josh Culibao really hasn't had that type of exposure in the UFC so far. Not a great regional scene career either, although he is 9-1-1. I could see Seungwoo Choi winning a decision here just because we've only seen Josh Culibao finished by TKO by Jalen Turner, who was a tough out for anybody. But, you know, decision-wise, Josh Culibao looks to be okay, but you're looking at a split draw to Charles Jourdain. You're looking at a split decision. You're looking at 2 majority decisions. So everything that he takes to the judges' scorecard ends up being very, very close, even at the low-level regional scene. So just all the skills considered, the things that usually plague Seungwoo Choi are not going to be present in this fight. I like that he's young, still improving at 29. Got the size advantage, got the experience advantage, and has the striking advantage. So I'm going to take Seungwoo Choi to win this fight by decision. Although I do think that this fight, the money line should be a little bit closer in this fight. Next up at middleweight is a bout between Brandon Allen and Jacob Malkoun. So Brandon Allen has been around top-tier competition his entire pro MMA career. You know, the stint in the LFA, fighting for the belt, eventually getting the belt, defending it. He's been in 5-round fights, headlining LFA cards, then comes to the UFC and, you know, has pretty good success so far against a wide variety of opponent. You know, the only guys that he's really lost to are guys like Chris Curtis beat him. You know, no shame there. Chris Curtis is an absolute animal. Sean Strickland beat him. Again, a guy who's pretty top tier. Those are the only 2 guys to beat him in the UFC. You know, before that, he's lost to Fluffy Hernandez. He's lost to Trevin Giles. And he lost to Eric Anders. But all of these guys are guys that have proven themselves victorious multiple times in the UFC. So, you know, you can't hate that. I think that only adds to his resume. He is only 26 years old, same as his opponent, Jacob Malkoun. The money line's wide, -300 for Brandon Allen at this point, +240 for Jacob Malkoun. This is largely due to the size discrepancy, I believe, and then also due to the fact that Jacob Malkoun, his win condition really falls into the expertise of of Brandon Allen. So it's really hard for me to imagine any area that Jacob Malkoun can really win this fight in the large majority of the time. Brandon Allen, like I said, the same age, 26, 75-inch reach for Brandon Allen, 2-inch reach advantage, but the size, just in the stature and the height, 6'2" for Allen, 5'9" for Malkoun. You're going to look like different weight classes here, almost because they are in different weight classes. Brandon Allen just fought at 205 against Sam Alvey in his last fight, finishing him inside the distance, as he should. And, at one point before, he fought a catch weight at 195. So he's, pretty comfortable being, above 185. The weight cut looks decent for him. He looks like a really good size for middleweight, just one of the bigger guys at the weight class, whereas Malkoun looks like he could really go down to 170. Jacob Malkoun's been in the UFC for 3 fights now. Obviously, got starched by Phil Hawes, I think in 2020, at some point in the fall, so things happen like that, just got blitzed early in his first fight. After that, he's been put up against a couple other power hitters like Abdul Razak Al Hassan and most recently AJ Dobson. So he's had success in these past 2 fights of nullifying, the power starters, the dangerous guys, being really patient, having a good game plan, and just grinding them and exploiting their weaknesses, which, in his case, his strength was the BJJ game, the top control, grinding them against the cage, eventually peeling them to the ground to get the control time, and staying active on top. So basically waits up the first round, nullifies their best win condition and power, and then wins the decision. So could he do that against Brandon Allen here? Possibly, but I really just think that the size is going to be too much to grind him against the cage, without wearing Jacob Malkoun out himself. I think the size will be too much. I think Brandon Allen is going to be stronger in those positions. And Brandon Allen wouldn't mind going to the ground either. Obviously, he'd probably rather keep it standing or at least be in top position. I don't think he's going to be pulling guard or anything like that with Jacob Malkoun on top. But Brandon Allen has shown pretty poor fight IQ from time to time. But 26 years old, I think he'll mature up and improve some of the bad choices he's made. He's got the good cardio, like I mentioned, going 5 rounds. I think his cardio should be on point, just like Jacob Malkoun has shown before. And I think the striking is going to be night and day. I think Brandon Allen, he's got those decent, long, powerful kicks. He can keep Malkoun at range. He's got pretty good combinations up top as well. And he's got some good dirty boxing against the cage, in his own right. So I don't see any area where Jacob Malkoun has the advantage that Brandon Allen doesn't, aside from maybe sticking to a patient game plan. But that can be improved for the part of Allen at 26 years old. So give me Brandon Allen to win this fight. The money line is wide. I think the money line is a little bit much. I do think that Brandon Allen could win this fight about 75% of the time, like the money line of -300 indicates, but that leaves no extra value. I'd probably look for Brandon Allen inside the distance. He is one of my more confident picks of the week, so give me Allen some point to get this done inside the distance, probably late in the fight. Up next at welterweight is a bout between Jack Della Maddalena taking on Ramazan Emeev. 10 years separate these two in age. Ramazan Emeev, the Dagestani grappler, is 35 years old, 68.5-inch reach at 5'10". Jack Della Maddalena has all of the tail of the tape advantage. I guess you could call it an advantage. 25 years old, so he's 10 years younger, an inch taller at 5'11", and about 5 inches more of reach, 73-inch reach for the striker, Jack Della Maddalena, who is coming in as the favorite, -160 over the Dagestani at +140 underdog price. You know why I say the age may or may not be an advantage here. I mean, they are at 170. The fall off for a lot of the divisions right around that 35-year mark. You've pretty much exhausted the peak, unless you're like at heavyweight or something like that. But Ramazan Emeev has had so much more experience. He's fought a lot of guys over in the M1 promotion in Russia, come over here in the UFC. He's had a pretty good success so far. Coming off of a loss, though, to Danny Roberts, which, he didn't do a lot to make you want to root for him to win, but he should have won that fight, losing that robbery of a split decision. He's also lost to Anthony Rocco Martin, which makes sense, a guy with decent anti-wrestling. So This is a huge step up for Jack Della Maddalena, who is coming off of a pretty easy breezy regional scene career with a lot of first round KOs. He does go on to the Dana White Contender Series, something I like to see from these first round finish guys, and he fought Angelusa and took him to his first and only decision in his career. Jack Della Maddalena, outstruck him. He had triple digit numbers on the significant strikes by the end of 3 rounds. You love to see the volume, effective striking. Even got a taste of, some grappling, some offensive grappling that he had to defend. So he was pretty explosive and athletic in his get-up game. Was put in a couple brief submission attempts. I want to say like a guillotine maybe at one point, and I remember an arm triangle as well, which he was able to get out of. So Angelusa, not anywhere near the offensive grappler or submission artist of a Dagestani, but at least we got to see a little bit of Jack Della Maddalena using some fight IQ, not panicking and getting out of a tough situation. Comes to the UFC, should have gotten Warlley Alves, which would have told us more about him in the division, but he got short notice replacement Pete Rodriguez, another regional scene guy, much more of a bum than Jack Della, and Jack Della treated him as such, knocked him out in round 1. So we still don't know much. We know that Jack Della has elite tier striking, very good combinations, mixes things up to the body, to the head, good combinations, good high kicks, things like that, and very good cardio for which equates to good volume output, But Ramazan Emeev is going to test his grappling, his defensive grappling. We don't really know what we're getting from Jack Della Maddalena, the young guy. So it's going to be tough. A lot of people are calling that this might be a split decision. It's going to be, what judges like control time, which judges like, effective damaging strikes and things like that. I totally agree. I think this is hard to call, hard to handicap just based on the lack of data, mostly from Jack Della Maddalena. This is a fight that I personally don't want a whole lot invested in betting-wise. This is a fight where whenever there's a big step up in competition this way with a young guy, I want a fight where I can data collect and learn before I put a whole lot of money behind him. I'm not just going to ride the hype train against the Dagestani, even though I do think that Ramazan Emeev is pretty inactive as far as the Dagestani grapplers go. I think Jack Della Maddalena is young enough, strong enough, and aggressive enough to deal with it. And I think that at the end of the day, the large number of strikes, his aggression, the damage he can put out on Ramazan Emeev is going to be enough to win a decision here. He's only had one decision, has Jack, like I mentioned on the Dana White Contender Series, Angelusa. Ramazan Emeev has only been knocked out once, and that was back in Russia in M1 6 or 8 years ago. So can't really count that too much. We're just going to have to assume that over a 3-round fight, at least 2 of those, Jack Della can spend the majority of it fighting off takedowns and then getting the effective striking and counter. Even in fights where Ramazan Emeev wins dominantly, he's really struggling to put up over 40 significant strikes. I think his record is like 50 significant strikes in a fight. Whereas Jack Della just did that. He did like 40 significant strikes against Pete Rodriguez in like 2.5 minutes. So obviously the output should be on his side. The cardio would be on his side unless he gets tired out from the grappling and defending things. But I'm going to call Jack Della Maddalena very low confidence pick here to win a decision. Again, this is one of the fights where I want to learn about Jack Della Maddalena. I want to learn about Ramazan Emeev a little bit more before I put a whole lot of money behind a newcomer. But give me the favorite, Jack Della Maddalena. Up next at men's flyweight is Manel Kape, Starboy, taking on Rogerio Bonterin. A pretty interesting fight here between these two guys. Because Manel Kape always scares me ever since he debuted in the UFC with how low output he is, low striking volume, picking his shots. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. He lost the decision against Pantoja for that reason early. The next fight against Matus Nicolau, same thing. Lost the split decision. He probably should have won, but it's hard to argue when he's so low output, until the very end. He does well as the fight progresses, kind of accelerates slowly, but lately he's on a 2-fight KO streak, so against Zalgas Almagulov and against Ode Osborne. So very explosive, athletic guy, proven overseas and risen. So he'll kind of be more towards his home country this time. Probably the hometown hero over in Singapore. So not a long travel for him. 28 years old, still a young guy. Rogerio Bonterin, only 30 years old, but, pushing more towards the top of the peak at flyweight is Bonterin. Both guys are 5'5", only an inch of reach in the advantage of Manel Kape. So Manel Kape was actually supposed to fight Sumaderji recently, I believe. I think like in April, he got pulled. I don't think he got licensed because he tested positive for, I think it was a Turinabol or an oral steroid metabolite. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Turinabol because it was, I remember thinking it was kind of an outdated drug because most of the time Turinabol was used back in the day before 10 years ago when they had this extended test for it. It used to actually clear your system in like 5 to 7 days. A lot of athletes used it, very popular Olympic drug. And then, they got the extended metabolite test for it. Now it can test all the way up to like, 5 to 7 months, more like. I think maybe John Jones had something similar, a similar metabolite back when they had to move the whole event. They started talking about picograms and all this stuff. All that stuff is just nonsense. Not to get on a tangent, but that's just nonsense just to let the athlete continue to fight. I'm all for it. I'm glad we're getting to this point. I think the drug testing from 2015 and on in the UFC has been a little bit too harsh, a little bit too unfair, and we need to get more like other major sports where they're allowed to cheat just enough. Not a ridiculous amount of cheating, but you can cheat and use steroids just enough to make it entertaining, to make it competitive, and to get the benefits from it. But it's not like the Wild West like it used to be, but just enough cheating. I'm all for that, but that's a whole different story. That's why Manel Kape didn't fight Sumaderji. That's why he's fighting overseas on this card where he can get a license to fight. Hopefully to continue using Turinabol because I'm going to pick him to win this fight. I think he has a pretty good chance of negating all the things that Rogerio Bonterin is good at. Luckily, Manel Kape is low striking output, but Rogerio Bonterin is even less of an output guy, so that doesn't scare me nearly as much. Bonterin is a guy who, on the striking numbers, by quite a good margin, gets outstruck compared to what he puts out striking-wise. The guy looks for relentless takedowns. He got that against Brandon Royval in his last fight. I think 8 recorded takedowns. Really bumped up the numbers to about almost 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. In his resume in the UFC so far for Bonterin. So that's pretty good. Manel Kape, though, is a very strong guy, very fast, very good defensive wrestler. He did in his past accept bottom position sometimes when I don't think he should have, and he played jiu-jitsu off of his back. So that does scare me a bit, but he does have a pretty good scramble ability and just the explosivity to get back to his feet. He's got this growing confidence in the octagon, which is great. He's on this 2 KO fight win streak, and I'm hoping he makes it a third here. Bonterin, however, you can't really bank on Manel Kape winning inside the distance because Bonterin's only been finished once by Kai Kara-France, by strikes, but, Manel Kape is... I think he's got the same amount of power as Kai Kara-France does, really. He does pick his shots a little bit too long sometimes, leading to the low output, but sometimes it pays off, and he can really jump on the opportunity like he did against Ode Osborne. So he's got an 80% takedown defense so far as well, does Manel Kape, so... hopefully all these things aid him well. They definitely support the minus 225 price tag on him as a favorite, plus 185 for Bonterin. It's just hard for me to get behind Bonterin. I mean, the guy has a pretty good record, like 16-4 professionally, but 3 of those, he's really been on a bad skid now because 3 of those 4 losses have all been in his last 4 fights. The fight that he did win against Matt Schnell, he even had turned into a no contest because he missed weight. So, well, that's not why it was no contest. He missed weight and used a banned diuretic to help him make weight, which he missed anyways. But anyways, so really the UFC competition has caught up to him, really ruined his record, which was, very, very stellar coming into the UFC. Now it's all the way down to, losing 3 of his last 4. One guy's on a downward trajectory, one guy's on an upward trajectory. I think Rogerio Bonterin's path to victory falls into part of the expertise of Manel Kape. Manel Kape, I think, beats this guy pretty much everywhere, as long as he doesn't do anything stupid like play jiu-jitsu off of his back or anything like that. But I think Manel Kape could win by decision or by finish. So give me Manel Kape to win. I'm pretty confident in him. Okay, this feels like a title fight, but it is Zhang Weili taking on Joanna Jedrzejczyk in the rematch. A couple years in the making, this rematch. at women's straw weight. And it's been a couple of years since we've seen Joanna Jedrzejczyk in the octagon because she hasn't fought since this very same fight, where she lost a very, very razor-close split decision to Zhang Weili, 5-round war, one of the best women's fights, if not the best women's fights we've ever seen in the octagon. So it'll be fun to see this ran back. Joanna Jedrzejczyk, now 34 years old, 5'6", 65.5-inch reach, versus the 32-year-old, the younger, 63-inch reach, 5'4", so slightly smaller, slightly younger favorite this time around. -165 favorite for Zhang Weili, +145 underdog, Joanna Jedrzejczyk. It kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, this should obviously, if you want to be real about it, this should be lined closer, but it makes sense to me just since, Joanna Jedrzejczyk, there's kind of this mysterious aura around, will she be ready to fight again? What's she looking like? Did she take off all of this time? She claims she's been training, but who really knows what people look like after 2 years away from the game, Not that she's missing much at women's straw weight, you know what I mean? But Zhang Weili has fought twice since then, losing both of them. One getting knocked out by Rose Namajunas, just like Joanna did in their fight. But then Zhang Weili came back last November and lost a very close split decision once again to Rose Namajunas. So coming off of 2 losses since she last beat Jedrzejczyk, you can see that both ways. Yes, she's more active. Yes, she's been, went to fight ready with Henry Cejudo, prepared for the whole fight with Rose, the rematch and whatnot. So she's been training her ass off and getting ready for fights, making weight, being competitive, all of that stuff. I think it makes a difference. I think it is more of a pro than a con. But, you can interpret it how you want to. It's kind of subjective. But I like the fact that she's been active. God only knows what Joanna's been doing in her time away. She might have a little bit of ring rust, might come back. And it really depends on how she comes back mentally and game plans this fight against Zhang Weili, in my opinion. If she comes back with a chip on her shoulder in round 1, goes back to the center of the octagon, tries to make this a brawl, I think she's going to lose this fight. I think that she needs to have a measured approach, maybe approach this differently. Not that she can come back and take it easy in round 1 and take that round off, but I think if she approaches this fight from a clean, technical striking standpoint, that's where she would have the most success and the best chance to win this fight. Whichever woman mixes things up the most, I think will win this fight. Zhang Weili is, attempted to have that heavy takedown game against Rose Namajunas. Worked very hard on her grappling and things like that, both defensive and offensively. I don't think she'll use it in this fight. I don't predict she'll use it in this fight unless the striking exchanges go she gets the short end of the striking exchanges and starts losing. Then maybe she would panic wrestle or at least try to mix it up to win the round back. But if the biggest twist would be if Joanna Jedrzejczyk came in here and utilized the grappling herself, seeing the holes in Zhang Weili's game against Rose Namajunas. So if she came in here, a new and improved fighter after the 2 years off, I think it's the woman who comes in here and mixes things up that's going to win the fight. Like I said, Joanna, if she just goes back and treats it like the first fight, tries to get in a dirty brawl and fights aggressively with her emotions, I think she'll lose this fight, regardless of her size advantage. I think it'll be the clean striking of Joanna versus the damaging, effective counter-striking of Zhang Weili. It's a very close fight. As I mentioned, this should probably be closer in the money line. I think Zhang Weili wins this fight. It's just a feeling I have based on her activity, and she's only lost to the top women. Both of these women have only lost to the top women in the division. It's very hard to gauge some of these women sometimes, especially at 115, when they only have like 1 or 2 common opponents. The rest of the opponents are so far below their talent level. It's just hard to even gauge those performances when they do fight other women. But I'm going to go with Zhang Weili. I'm going to go with the one who, technically won the fight the first time, even though it was very close. I think this fight will once again be like a 29-28, very close fight. But I think Zhang Weili has the better chance to win this one. just based off of her effective counter-striking, her damaging strikes, and potentially mixing in some grappling as well, some cage control. So give me Zhang Weili. Very low confidence pick since we haven't seen Joanna in a couple of years. Okay, time for the first championship of the night, and that is the women's flyweight belt, 125, Valentina Shevchenko, the minus 625 reigning champion favorite over the challenger Taila Santos, plus 450 underdog. Juicy numbers here. I mean, it's a little bit closer than a Shevchenko fight usually is, at least currently. I wonder if it'll close around the minus, 8 to 1,000 range. I'm sure it would have already been higher by now, but the shiny 19-1 record of Taila Santos is really pushing the number down on this one, I think, for Shevchenko. I see a lot of love out there for Taila Santos. People concerned about Shevchenko's age at 34. She is 5'5", 66.5-inch reach, slightly outsized on the metrics. The 28-year-old younger Taila Santos is 5'6", with a 68-inch reach, so an inch of height and a couple inches of reach for the challenger. Shevchenko really, aside from one fight, outside of the UFC, she's only lost to Nunes in Nunes' prime a couple times in very, very close fights. So other than that, she's been a girl who not only is a dominant champion, but she destroys women who are supposed to be durable and tough challengers, like Caitlin Chukagian gets finished, Jessica Andrade gets finished, and Lauren Murphy most recently gets finished inside the distance. Sometimes Shevchenko, if I had to make a criticism, she is somewhat low volume. She does everything perfectly, right? Good control, good footwork, good movement, counters, good power when she does land. But before some of those moments, sometimes it is rather low volume. But, she does fight a smart fight, and she does enough to win the round. So I can't hate too much on that. Taila Santos is potentially facing one of the biggest step-ups in competition I've seen in the women's divisions. I mean, you're talking about, we mentioned her stellar 19-1 record. Who are the last three people on that record? You're talking about Joanne Calderwood, who she most recently defeated, pretty dominantly, which set up this title fight. But before that was Roxanne Modafferi and Jillian Robertson. So, I mean, what a streak to set up a title fight. I mean, that's just crazy. That's her last three best performances. The three top women she's got on her resume. I'll give her that. The Joanne Calderwood one was very dominant, in round one, but knocked her down, choked her out. But, I mean, come on. The fact that the fight before that is Roxanne Modafferi just really does not sit right with me. But nonetheless, there's nobody else with a 19-1 record who can outsize the champion, so we'll take that big step up in competition, see what she can do. I see a lot of talk about her physicality and her strength. I see that too. I see that potentially as a way to stall some of the damage that she's going to take from Shevchenko. Maybe get some cage control time, and maybe even get a body lock and drag Shevchenko to the ground, It's possible, but will she do it for 3 out of 5 rounds? I'm not so sure about that. Not only is the experience so night and day between Shevchenko and Taila Santos, but the 5-round experience, how many times has Shevchenko been into championship rounds and either gotten the finish or went all 25 minutes to a judge's scorecard? I mean, it's been countless, and Taila Santos has not done that once. So, big step up in competition, big stage, championship fight for her. Unproven, championship round cardio for her. Just way too hittable as well. I mean, she's been hit cleanly by some of these women that I've listed off here. So I don't think she can let some of those mistakes fly against the likes of Shevchenko. I'd love to try to take a juicy underdog shot on Taila Santos, but I just don't think I can get there. I think that there may still be value left on Shevchenko, in all honesty, at minus 625. Maybe some of those props, the round props of like I mentioned, Taila Santos not having the experience in rounds 4 and 5. Maybe you could look for rounds 4 or 5, inside the distance for Shevchenko. Maybe that would be a way to attack this. But other than that, I think Shevchenko is a pretty safe pick. This is not a controversial pick this week, but I just don't really see too many ways at plus 450 that Taila Santos is really worth the bet in this fight. So I'm going to take Valentina Shevchenko to win this fight somewhere in round 4 or 5. Okay, here we are, the main event of the evening. 205-pound championship on the line between Glover Teixeira defending against Jiri Prochazka. Glover Teixeira is a guy I've seen for a long, long time. I started watching this guy, I think probably back in the WEC stint when he knocked out Sokaju, who I was always a big fan of. So that was shocking at the time. Probably shouldn't have been, but it was at the time. It was shocking. And then I ended up actually being in Las Vegas and watching Dos Santos take on Frank Mir on short notice. And that's the night that Glover Teixeira made his UFC debut for the first time, getting his win. So that was just over 10 years ago, I believe, back in 2012. So obviously, it's no surprise. This guy's old. He's been around for a long time. He's 42 years old. Never thought he'd have the championship at this point, but crazy things have happened. He's 6'2", 76-inch reach, 42 years old. The measurables all go in the favor of the challenger, Jiri Prochazka, only 29 years old, 6'3", 80-inch reach. Both have amazing records. 28, 3-1 for Jiri Prochazka. Glover Teixeira 33-7. Glover Teixeira honestly has had a much tougher road to getting that impressive record. The better opponents, I think some really tough stylistic matchups have come his way. In his last 6 fights, he's on a 6-fight winning streak. Jiri Prochazka obviously on like a 12-fight winning streak. With his 2 of those, the 2 recent ones being in the UFC. Otherwise, he's been fighting a lot of pretty notable names outside of the UFC. Has Jiri Prochazka in Risen mostly. He's fought a lot of guys who have fanned out of the UFC before, like CB Dalloway, Darko Stosic, even Fabio Maldonado. But some guys that were pretty top-tier talents in Bellator, like Karl Albrechtsen currently in Bellator, Vadim Nemkov, and King Mo, Mohamed Lawal back in the day. So he's fought a lot of notable names. Still, some of these guys not on the in the prime of their career, but he's made things look pretty easy against all of them. He does, however, struggle with the grappling. A lot of that is due to his flashy striking. A lot of kicks, a lot of jumping knees. He's kind of careless as far as his striking defense and his grappling defense. He cannot be careless as far as the grappling defense in this match. Obviously, if this fight hits the mat for any period of time, it's going to be very scary for him. And Glover Teixeira is probably licking at his chops, just thinking about grabbing the hips of Jiri Prochazka, dragging him to the mat. I think that might be a tough task, though, because I'm hoping, if Jiri is smart, he's been over at Fight Ready, obviously with Henry Cejudo, taking this very seriously. So you like to see that. At 29, still making improvements, a student of the game. But you're going to hope that he throws less flashy techniques and just mostly uses his striking with the hands, and limits those long teep kicks, limits the flying knees and stuff like that, and almost limits the amount of forward pressure that he usually is relentless with, because all of those things will aid in Glover getting him to the ground with the level change. So, it's kind of the binary fight, right? If this stays on the feet for an extended period of time, Glover Teixeira, although he has shown, durability as a whole, he's only been knocked out officially 3 times. He has been knocked down in the UFC about a total of 5 times with 4 different opponents. So he has gotten himself in a lot of trouble, but his opponents have either followed him to the mat, or he's managed to somehow drag the fight late and get the submission. So he's been very good. In those last 6 wins of his on his streak, he's either been an even money pick'em or an underdog, a sizable underdog in those fights, and come through. So he's really paying out big for anybody who's backing him to win these fights. It's going to be an interesting fight. All of the numbers are juiced for the fight doesn't go, because both of these guys have a crazy percentage of finish rate. Out of the past 10 fights for both guys, all 10 have finished inside the distance at the hands of Jiri Prochazka. The past 10 fights for Glover Teixeira, 7 of those have finished inside the distance. So obviously, fight doesn't go to decision is anywhere between minus 500 to minus 700. It could be a parlay piece, but you're not getting much value on that. Crazy things do happen. This could go late if both guys are measured. So I don't like that one, in all honesty. Even the under 2.5 is getting close to like the minus 200 range. Still a little bit better because this probably will finish, under 2.5 comfortably, but still, you're kind of paying a big price for a fight where I think there's some unknowns to it. Basically, this comes down to the age factor for me. As far as a pick for myself goes, it's going to be very hard for me to get on the side, no matter how big of an underdog. Right now is plus 170 versus the favorite in Jiri Prochazka minus 200. Now, I think this should be closer to a 50-50 fight, but 42 years old, it's very hard for me to get on your side at this point in your career. I'm not really a handicapper that will go off of a lot of the narratives of the outside of the tape study and outside of the stats, but the retirement question is looming, right? How many more fights are you going to have at 42 years old, turning 43 in October? You're probably going to have maybe 1-2 more fights this year and then call it quits, regardless if you win or lose. I never like that to be hanging in the distance for a guy that I'm going to back in a fight. So I do like the young and improving potential for Jiri Prochazka in this fight. I think that the standing striking exchanges will be night and day. Glover Teixeira is very hittable these days, and his striking offense is very, very limited and very, very basic. He doesn't throw any straight punches, really. It's either a hook or an overhand, something like that. Maybe even like a shovel punch attempt. Things that he really overextends on, things that you can see coming a mile away. I think the way that Glover will be 5 steps ahead if this hits the mat, I think Jiri will be 5 steps ahead if this stays standing for any period of time. He's very good at cutting off the cage. Very good at, throwing in combination, throwing with diversity to the body, to the head, mixing things up. Like I said, if he can just be a little bit more analytical, pick his shots a little bit better on the feet, and not go so wild with the forward pressure to get taken down, I think Jiri can make a very quick night in the octagon and finish this in rounds 1 or 2. I also think that if he stays measured enough and avoids getting taken down, maybe shores up that takedown defense here, I think he could drag this fight out late, too, and wear down Glover Teixeira to the point where he could, sort of succumb to the strikes of Jiri Prochazka, and the fatigue might have a little bit to do with that if this goes late. So putting points up on the board, the guy who's got more volume per minute, the guy who's way better in the feet, technical striker, the younger, more improving guy, the guy with 80-inch reach, 4 inches of reach, an inch of height. A guy who's fought at heavyweight before. I think all of those things really go into the favor, of the guy with a lot of momentum behind him in Jiri Prochazka. Now, obviously, I did say that I thought this was like closer to 50-50 fight. Jiri has struggled with the grappling. He has struggled with it. Any period of time that Glover Teixeira can grab the hips and take him down to the mat, Jiri Prochazka, even in his last fight against Reyes, showed a shocking poor ability to get to his feet, because he got to his feet by kind of just exploding, to giving his back to Reyes. That's not what you want to see somebody get back to their feet when they're fighting Glover Teixeira. If you give your back to this guy, it's going to be like as quick as the Jan Blachowicz fight. He'll be tapping pretty quickly or going to sleep. So, I am going to pick Jiri Prochazka as a pick. From a gambling perspective, if you're a value bettor, I think all of the value falls onto Glover Teixeira, because this should be a straight pick'em fight, in my opinion. Whereas Glover Teixeira, the sitting champion, is a plus 170 underdog. And he probably, if he wins, I don't see him winning a 5-round decision. I think he'll get this done by submission, or at least inside the distance. Maybe a ground and pound stoppage as well. And you can probably find that, I think, for 100 points better, like a plus 275. So if you're going to back Glover Teixeira, which I wouldn't blame you for, I would choose him inside the distance at that plus 50, plus 275 number. But I'm going to pick Jiri Prochazka. I'm pretty confident in the young gun here. I just don't like the fact that Glover is so old in this fight. I know that's a weak argument, but again, it's night and day on the feet. With the improvements that Jiri can potentially make, I'm going to bank on those versus the finished product at 42 years old, the slightly declining product at 42 years old of Glover Teixeira. I got to pick the young guy here, the guy with more momentum, and the guy with more to gain out of this victory than Glover Teixeira. So give me Jiri Prochazka to win a pretty early first or second round stoppage victory by strikes here. Okay, guys, there you have it. All 12 fights broken down for this weekend's card, UFC 275. Texeira versus Prochazka for the 205-pound strap. I'm so geeked for this card. Leave a comment down below on what your predictions are for this card. If you disagree with me, if you agree with my takes, I want to hear it in the comments below. Smash that like, smash that subscribe, and I will talk to you guys next time on the best bets video that I will drop in the next day or two. I will try to get that best bets and props video out before the weigh-ins this week. I know lately I've been doing that on Friday. This week I'll try to do it a bit earlier so that for this big pay-per-view card we can digest the information and make the best value bets we possibly can. Good luck in all your betting action this weekend. I will talk to you guys next time. Cheers.